Hi everyone. I really enjoyed this article that we read this week for this week's assignment from Husty and Jackson. In this article, we talked about different strategies to use when teaching students about science vocabulary words, especially when they're English language learners. And specifically, they talked about the topic of solids, liquids, and gases. I took a lot from this article, especially some of the strategies I really would like to implement in a classroom maybe one day. Something that I would do maybe a little bit differently than what they said would maybe for the mystery containers, I would do a pillow bag or another type of baggie and have my students split it up into groups. One student would be blindfolded and the other student would be holding the bag. The student that is blindfolded would be sticking their hand in the bag, feeling around, and they would be telling the student that was holding the bag different characteristics about what they're feeling. They would want to use vocabulary words from the chapter, words that we've talked about, and they would just want to describe it. Is it a solid, liquid, or gas? Why they think it's one of those categories, and then what classifies it under those categories. If it's a solid, what do they feel? Is it hard? Is it soft? They would go into detail about what they feel, maybe what it sounds like when they're shaking it around, or maybe even it has an aroma to it. What do they smell? Using the kinesthetic awareness for this activity would help engage the student completely and get them involved in the activity. Something else I would do for the window activity, instead of having the students fold their paper up and do vocabulary words and definitions on one side, I would maybe have them do vocabulary words on one side and then have them write a picture on the other side. I think images are a great way for students to remember words. I know from personal experience, if I write an image next to a word, I'm able to pull that image. Like that image comes to my head before a word comes to my head, so they can recognize those two things together, and that would help their recollection and remembering the words. So what they would do would they fold their paper, hot dog and then hamburger. And as we go through different vocabulary words, we would write it down on the left and then draw a picture on the right for them to help remember it. So it's like their own little definition, but in images, not in words. So the next thing that I would do would be the bag and tag wall, which I thought was an amazing strategy to use. Normally you see word walls up on walls and they kind of just sit there. Usually teachers don't really do much with them, but I think they're an amazing tool to use if you use them effectively. And I love the idea of the bag and tag wall. Something that I would do to help my students get fully engaged in that bag and tag wall would be a scavenger hunt. So instead of me providing the images or the solid, physical object I want to put in that bag, I'm going to have my students go out in the classroom, find what they can see in the classroom that would classify under that definition of that image. So if, say, it's a solid, what can we find in the classroom that's a solid? If it's a liquid, what can we find in the classroom that would be classified under as a liquid? And so on and so on. So every vocabulary word would have something physical with it that they found in the classroom. Every student was a part of this scavenger hunt. So that just means they were all engaged, they were all participants in it. And I think when everybody is engaged as one and we all take a part in an activity, that even helps us remember it even more. We're just not a passenger, we are the leading of the activity and everyone has a role, so then we are fully engaged and it'll help remember that item, especially if it's an everyday item that they see maybe all the time. That'll help them associate that item with a word, and their recollection of that definition maybe will come a little bit easier for them. The last thing in the article, they talked about combining everything and bringing it all together under one activity. Something I would do would be I would use my bag and tag wall, but I also would incorporate the blindfold that I used from the mystery container. So I would have my students go through, and when we're reviewing the bag and tag wall, I maybe would pick a few students up, we would blindfold them, and then we would give them a bag from our bag and tag wall, and they would need to give us characteristics of what they feel, everything about what they're feeling inside the bag, whether they're blindfolded. And I would want them to try to guess what word from the bag and tag wall is associated with that bag. What one should we tag that bag with? I think this would just help a great review for all the students. The blindfold maybe would bring in a little bit of fun to the activity, and it would just be a good reoccurring of vocabulary words for every student. And also associating the vocabulary word with an item or an image like we did in the window activity. This would especially help English language learners just because we're not so worried about our words. Sometimes with English language learners, writing stuff down on paper is one of the hardest things for them. So if they have an image or something they see or they write, it'll help associate that word even better for them because they're not too worried about the whole lengthy definition and every word that's in that definition. Even in their native language, that image is still the same thing. So they can help associate that image not alone with the English word that they are learning, but maybe also in their native language word. So I really enjoyed this article, and I look forward to reading more articles throughout the semester.